This is Chicago at the turn of the 20th century, so the 1900s. This is Millennium Park in 1900s. It was filled with railways. This street right here is called Randolph Street. Keep that in mind because that's one of the streets that remains. Navy Pier still exists. This is now an entertainment zone in the city. But the rest, all this was the industrial heart of our country. Again, this is just showing it in plan. Those were the rail lines. You can see the Chicago River is running out to Lake Michigan. This area is the area that we're talking about. It's called Lake Point East. Actually, yeah, Lake Point East all the way out to this point. This is 1901. 1933, so this is the site. Oh, it's on this, sorry. It's on this side. And this is called Lake Point East. This was designed in 1995, and it was designed by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. It is supposed to have 5,000 units of housing. There are hotels. Again, just to situate, this is Millennium Park that you saw last night. This is Randolph Street. That was that elevated. And this was Wacker Drive. And again, it's another elevated street, which you'll see in sections. So north is up. Here is the site. And at this point, this is about a 6-acre piece of park, and that was designed for this little community that surrounds it, and then there's another ring that surrounds that park. So you have sort of a double ring. Again, just as an aerial. So you have, this is a major highway called Lakeshore Drive. Here is, you can see the little bridge of Frank Gehry's. This is the Amoco building. Aqua is now right here. And that's the building that was designed by Jeannie. And here is the big park. So it's an idealized precinct. It's almost a gated community in a certain way. It's surrounded by, it's cut off as a barrier. And again, think about what those barriers were yesterday. You have the river at one level. You have a major highway here. You have a park that is at a lower level, which you'll see in section. And then you have 3 levels of another major road and 3 levels on this side. On the park, these are the newest residential. This one just received a number of awards. Again, it's a monolith that's just been extruded and it's looking south. And here is the view there. All apartments. But this is the view. So they're looking south at Millennium Park. Again, just in plan, you'll see the numbers are listed here. I think it's too far away for you to see these. But the square footage, it's all in square feet, but we do have the numbers right here for you to convert. But this is the area. Again, residential at the ground floor. There's some retail. This is the Aqua that you may be familiar with. This is the first of the multi-use buildings. There's a hotel at the base. So you have retail and hotel at this point. Then you have rental. And you also have ownership, condominiums. So it was the first of its kind in this area. And again, 82 stories. It's the tallest building in this grouping. Over 1.4 million square feet. This is Jeannie's when they were deciding how they were going to work this facade. They started to look at climate, views, making something unique for each apartment or condominium. So they started to look at the limestone rock formations within the Midwest, as well as the idea of the water, surrounded by water. So they did a number of studies, and then they started to push and pull these balconies. So each person has a unique balcony. Now, again, Chicago is not a warm weather climate, but I think that it still is being used quite well. And it also allows for very unique views, both south, north, east, and west. And again, looking up, it's a beautiful, looking up is the most beautiful. But the glass, and I'm sure she'll explain more when she's here, these were all different sorts of glass, and that had to do with the climate, whether it was facing west, south, north, and east. So when you drive by it, you don't typically see it if you're walking, looking up. But if you drive along Lakeshore Drive, you do see a change in those, the fenestration. So the Aqua building is right here. The Regatta, which is again a new apartment building, relatively new, and this is all rental. This is adjacent to your site, and I'll show you that, along with the Tides. Again, these are very typical apartment buildings within this part of the city. And then the latest one, adjacent to your site, is called Coast, and that just opened in February, a rental building with, again, balconies, but a very different idea about balconies. This is the view, so you'll see this is the Regatta. And then you don't see, because it's just being built right here, that's the Coast. And here's your site, right in there. So again, this is a great view in the summer. And at the end of this vista, this river, this is the Trump Tower. This is all residential at this point. So again, this has become a neighborhood, but again, you have the river, you have a highway, you also have, as you'll see in the drawings, that this is a 3-level major street. The purple areas that are shown right here are ways to get down, to navigate through the site. And again, you'll see the key when you get this. This is too big. I tried to make it as big as I could just to show you the sites. But these are the public connections down to the lower levels. The proposed program: 330 units of hotel, rental apartments, almost twice as many as the condominium units. Again, nothing was specified whether it was 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, or studio. I think that you can decide that. At this point, it is anywhere from studio to convertible, 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom. They're smaller units. And if you look at the numbers, for instance, the rental apartments, this is approximately 1,000 square feet per unit. So that's 100 square meters, more or less. So again, if you just took one typical, that would be 1,000. The amenities, and again, these are suggested, so I want you to think about the site. But at this point, a theater, and again, I didn't break out all the pieces, so it would combine a theater, club room, workout space, a pool. Our pool would have to be indoors. Fitness center, saunas, showers, so more of like a little health club for the space. Lounges, toilets, kitchenette, that would all be part of the public amenity. Parking, 350 units of parking has to be included in this. So the studio site starts at ground zero. Now this is just speaking about the Chicago datum line. So just say that this is 0 and 22 feet. This is all in feet. I'm sorry, this is what I was given on that. So 22 feet, and then at the level of the upper third, so you have 3 levels of road, as I was trying to talk about. And that's 55 feet, just to begin with, just so you could see it from the top. These were service roads at one time. They're still used for that. It's dark. It hasn't really been developed as a space for pedestrians at this point. But again, just to show you that we do have some topography in Chicago. The studio site, again, this is the longitudinal east-west. And the coast, I showed it to you in photo. Regatta, I showed it to you. So these are 460, 500, and we're talking about now 80 stories. Aqua is 82 stories. So you'll see what an enormous building this is. Again, you can go higher if you'd like. There's no stopping you on that, just structurally. Again, I just wanted to show as we go through it. So we've just looked at the longitudinal, which is that way, east-west. And again, this is the section across Lakeshore East Park. So the big park, you're looking across it, and this is what you see. Yeah. This is a little difficult because Lakeshore Drive, the way that this is shown, let's go back to the plan. That is talking about Lakeshore Drive north. And if you look at an aerial, you'll see that it's on center with Lakeshore Drive going north. Lakeshore Drive is over here going south, so it's not really centered on both sides. So again, that was what the architect placed, and I got a little confused about that one. Again, it's surrounded by this section. It's a very difficult site to even think about because of these 3 sections. On the lower level, when you look at the south elevation from Columbus Wacker Drive, so you're on the north looking south, you see this is a brand new building here too. This is an urban school, and that's the size of it. And it's going to be a private charter school, and that's under construction and should be completed by the end of the year. Again, the studio site right here. Aqua is the tallest, and you're looking back at it, north elevation from the water. And then the Chicago River, again, this is the section through the park. So you're in the park, and you're across the Chicago River facing west. And again, the site. And those are the drawings that I have for you. It's an interesting site because of the water. Chicago, we really take advantage of water. Along Lakeshore Drive, we have beautiful buildings that, yes, there is this barrier of Lakeshore, and yet there are pedestrian bridges, pedestrian tunnels taking you out to, there's bicycle paths, there are beaches, it takes you out to Navy Pier. The Chicago River has a couple of river walks, not this far down, I don't believe. I think it goes maybe just to that point of this site. And they keep developing more of the river walks. So you, as a pedestrian path, you may want to think about that area as well. But Chicago's known for its suspension, its bridges. There are I think they have the most bridges of any city in the United States. Boats travel through this in the fall and in the spring, the sailboats, and it's really a beautiful area to watch in that way. So you do understand the seasons. At this point, the river's green because of St. Patrick's Day. They just dyed it, and that's a tradition in the city. And it's also frozen at this point. We've never had it so frozen. The lake, Michigan, was 92% frozen this year, the most ever. It's been a cold winter. Okay, I'm going to get on to the lectures that I was planning to do. And again, this is in continuing with, it's interesting that I've found that the unvolumetric, the arts, innovation, those are things that interest me very much. And now I'm giving you a tower for your project. So how do you work with something that has so many, I think towers have so many restrictions in certain ways, constraints. And so with that card game, maybe you can think about what can you do to broaden and use that as an opportunity rather than just seeing them as a constraint. So now, for me, I'm back to where do some of the innovators start? And that I see that in the United States at the university level. So for the past, I'd say 10, 15 years, universities throughout our country have been looking at the arts and saying, we've got all this technology, we have the sciences, we are really pushing the field in so many ways. And then all of a sudden, where are the arts? How do the arts come into this? And I think some of the most forward-thinking universities in our country are starting to realize that it's just as important to be creative in order to come up with new and innovative, technologically important ideas. So this quote I find very interesting. This was Shirley Tillman from Princeton University. She was the former president, a scientist, and she is one of the biggest champions of art and the performing arts. And she said, before they started their journey, which has been a journey trying to get their performing arts up and running, she said, the creative and performing arts provide a distinctive and valuable medium for comprehending the challenges of our age and for increasing our understanding of ourselves, our neighbors, and others with whom we share this planet. And for me, that's a really powerful idea, that she's going back to really what is it about us as unique human beings? Music, art, performing arts, theater, dance, that you're using your own creative spirit to come up with something perhaps a little different from the person next to you. So I'm going to show you 3 examples. And again, I chose East, West, and Midwest for the examples. And they're very different. There's some things that are the same. But I'd like to have a discussion after these 3 just to see your take on which ones you think might provide a certain way of thinking or maybe spark more interaction. The first one will be Brown University. And again, Brown University is in Rhode Island, which is just south of Boston. And I don't know if any of you have ever been to Rhode Island. It's about that big, a postage stamp of a state. But Brown University is one of the Ivy League schools. And it's known for its creative arts. It's always been known for that, English. But what they tried to do with this new building is make it more of an innovation that not only the arts but the sciences come together, that there was some need to bring everybody together within a building. And this building is located in the heart of the university. The architect is Diller and Scofidio, the ones who did the High Line and Lincoln Center. And they came up with this idea, okay, it's a small building, this one's small. How can we get people to interact physically? And what they did is they took the program and they split it so that you now have rooms that overlook rooms. So this becomes some sort of transparent material And you can have something going on here and something going on here, very different, and yet you're seeing people at the same time. Again, this is their section rendering of how they could see it, that it's a constant movement of people, dancers. They'll have some sort of seminar going on. And down here, it looks like a study area. So with the glass, that's the sound that you don't want to, maybe you don't want transmission of music throughout, but while you're studying, or maybe you do, but this allows you that sort of separation and connection. The plan is pretty straightforward in this way. The service area, where everybody communicates in terms of stairs and elevators, is just in this bar. This is, again, that, and this is, sort of the back of house things. And then this whole area allows this interaction, this switch of section. And then the theater as a theater that is also outside, so you can sit outside and see what's going on inside. Again, trying to bring, this is one of the major paths at Brown. And so the students are walking by. They might see something happening there. They enter here. They sit down and watch. So again, I think they're just trying to gather people into the heart of the university and celebrate the creative arts. Plan 3, this is sort of a typical section. This is or typical plan, that you have media, multimedia, wood shops, electrical shops, and then you have the dancers. Again, it's a mixing of the two programs. They show it in the massing and in the elevation. This has only been open a couple of years. A nice winter day. You don't really see anybody sitting on those stairs at this point. This is the approach from the other side. And this is the back. So again, it lifts up. It lets you peek through even if you're coming from the back side of the building. You see the people up here. They can watch what's going on as well. So it's constant. It's from the north, south, east, west. There's privacy, and yet there's openness. Communication. So you can't just go up a stair and not see anyone. And again, looking at it in a different way. The nighttime view, which, again, it becomes really, if you look at all the buildings surrounding it, these are just your typical classroom buildings, and then you have this lantern. Now, we're back to my hometown, the University of Chicago. And this idea was also not only bringing all the performing arts together, but actually turning the university to the south. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Recentering the university. This is all of the south side. In fact, the Millennium Park and the rest of the downtown is about 10 miles, 6 kilometers away. So again, the city is huge. And this area right here is University of Chicago. It's surrounded by 2 major parks, Washington and Jackson along this side. And this is where the 1893 World's Fair was. The Midway was designed, this was all designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, a famous landscape architect in the United States. And so in the beginning, the university built everything north of the Midway. The surrounding areas, this area and this area, mainly residential. Not quite, this is really mainly for the students and the faculty. On this, as you see here, this is a good way to show the map, you see a lot of empty lots. It's not quite as concentrated. This is a very poor area of Chicago. Dangerous area. And it's yet so close to a major institution, the University of Chicago. What the university wanted to do is they had a small piece of, it was an art studio, and they said, how can we get the students to feel comfortable crossing the Midway? Well, we want to use it as an anchor, and what better anchor to be than the performing arts? And so what they did is that they decided, again, this is the old right here, and these were all the old quadrangles, and they started building up in this area in the 90s, but here they have all this expansion space, and yet people were scared to walk from here to here. It's not that long of a distance, but there's nothing between the built environment here and just this row of existing buildings right now. This is what the Midway looked like back in 1893. So this is the fair. And it was filled with activity. And so to go from that to, here's the Midway now. It's beautiful, it's lush, but there's a psychological fear there, that there's something, if you cross that area, you could get into trouble. And I'm sure there are places in Sao Paulo that are similar. If there aren't enough people and not enough activity, you don't feel safe anymore. So it's a very, idyllic setting, these beautiful Gothic, 1920s buildings, and then you walk across this manicured lawn and you're looking over your shoulder the whole time. And you can see this is the city in the distance. So it's quite removed. This is the character of the Midway as you look to the north at the quadrangle. I mean, again, it's beautiful during the day. And this was the art studio. This is all they had across to house all the arts. And this was just a funny little building, a historic building, that they added on painting studios. So if you look at the arts where they were, you have galleries way up north. This is their own museum. These are areas where you can have the theaters up here. Then there's the Oriental Institute, which is another famous museum that houses Middle Eastern art. You have the Renaissance Society. And they looked at all the pieces that they have. And they said, okay, what if we brought them all down here? And again, they kept the Smart Gallery. They kept the museum. But what if they brought everything to this? Maybe they could create a hub, a 24-hour, very vital area for the students. So again, this was the site. You see this beautiful manicured park that nobody uses at night. And there was a competition. And again, this was won by Todd Williams and Billy Shen, New York architects. They've done a number of the Folk Art Museum. You may or may not know, it's being destroyed in New York City by the Museum of Modern Art. It's very controversial right now. They're taking, after 10 years, they're destroying that museum, which is one of my favorites. But this is the architects who did that building. So they're very concerned about the tactile quality of buildings. And what they said is that they thought a tower would be good. Amongst this whole area, there's no tower except the church, the Rockefeller Center. So what if we gave a tower to the arts so that everybody could see it from Lakeshore Drive as they entered into the campus? They won. This is the built. The materials have changed somewhat, and that had to do more with budget. But again, you certainly can see it. It towers over everything else. But this is the Midway as you approach it. It's a huge program. It starts with, again, here's the Midway. And so you're coming from the north into the south. These are the art rooms now. This was the old building that I showed you previously. This was expanded upon back in the, I think, 50s and 60s. And so they just created a whole compound of art. They added gardens so that they could connect to the next building to the south. Again, this is just a more clean plan. So they show a lot of people. And actually, there were a lot of people at the opening. I haven't been down in about 6 months, but it was like that. This is the entrance. Faculty exhibits, their student exhibits, their theater, music. It's, they have their own curator of keeping this place busy 24 hours a day. This is up in the tower, and these are multi-purpose rooms that could be used for dance, music, not so much the art, the creating of the art, but the showing of the art. It could be here. This is coming down into, going into the theater. And the section is such that they've tried to, again, do something similar to what Diller and Scofidio did. This is an earlier building. And then having a separate piece so the public could come into this and not disturb the students if need be. This is the section, exploded axonometric. One thing that Billy and Todd do, I think, quite well are we have exit stairs. We have to have numerous fire stairs in our buildings. And this is a fire stair, which is not made of the cheapest materials and hidden, but rather they've opened it up so that you can actually meet here and talk and as you're coming down, because this is the major way of communication. There are a couple of elevators, but people don't use those so much when you're going up into the tower. So with materials that are nice to touch and making it so that you see as you come through, you have different views going up. They're not always the same. It's not all within a single tower. Again, very similar in the Diller at Scofidio, much larger, but as you're walking by, you can look down into the art studios. Then these are offices. Again, this was the rendering. This is the reality. Messy, which it should be, but beautiful light, skylights throughout. And then the offices are up here. A hallway, again, just happenstance that you could sit and do your work here if you didn't find a place in a room. This is at the opening. They weren't quite finished, but it was nice. Getting messy, but you see the process. Everybody sees the process. And then again, this is the multi-purpose performing room up on top, but you see the view out. It's a very strong presence on the Midway. And then you look down, and they've used, again, they've started to do some sustainable techniques of the roof. You're not looking just on a white roof that Chicago requires, but now it's being planted, so it's part of the landscape. And this is the night view. All right, and for the last one for the arts, it's Stanford University. Now, Stanford obviously is known for its technology and science, and because I went there, I was very curious to see what they had done. I was a pianist before I was an architect, and the piano rehearsal spaces at Stanford were in trailers up on the knoll. That was the last thing that they were renovating, was the music and the arts. So I was glad to hear that one donor, and it was one donor who gave the seed money for this project. And this was designed by James Polshek. Now it's called Enniad Architects from New York. And this is right at the front door of Stanford. So now they've really said, no, this is an important thing for our campus. It's not tucked away, it's not in trailers, it's not in temporary settings. So it was how do you bring people in very formally and yet show that it's an inviting place? And this was the rendering that was created. This is the reality. So it's pretty much on point. What I find interesting about it is that this whole area is lobby. And within that lobby, much can take place. There are benches, there are seating arrangements. This has become a communal space for the students as well as visitors. I was surprised to see that. This obviously is a very formal and very well thought out theater for music more than anything else. And then you have the subsequent, service along these edges. But this is the door off of Palm Drive. And I think that in that way, you'll see it, the section has taken, the theater is really a major piece, but the lobby surrounding has become really the space, the unvolumetric, although it's volume, space in this. As you can also see that within the plan, and I'll go back to that, there are these cutouts which allow for light to enter along the circulation. So you constantly see gardens, even though you're inside the space and you haven't gone into the theater yet. It's broad enough that you can have a lot of activities all at one time. And then this is the space inside. A major theater, a major performance space. Acoustics, they were very concerned about that, and they were studying, they used a Japanese acoustician for this, one of the best in the world. And then they have the lounge spaces outside. And again, California, you can do that. You can sit outside most of the year. And you have the canopy, so if it's raining, you still could sit out there. This wouldn't happen at the University of Chicago. But again, the surrounding is such that you're coming right down at the front door before you come to the major. So they've really put a prominence on it. All right, now, I wanted to show you yet another building type that is becoming very prevalent, at least in our country, starting at the universities and working its way out into the cities. And these are called collaborative learning environments, or sometimes called innovation centers. And it seems that every university in our country is talking about an innovation center. Ideas of what innovation means? When you think of innovation? Okay, well, that's how I felt when I was hired to do the programming and mission of an innovation center. I had no idea what they meant by that because there are so many different readings. And so I went on a journey with the university that I'm with, and we had a one-day retreat with all the deans and all the heads of every academic unit to find out what they thought innovation was. And what I'm going to show you today is 3 case studies that I took a number of people, users, around and showed them what was considered an innovation or a collaborative learning environment, so that they could see the physical reality of what these things are throughout the country. And perhaps then they could understand what they wanted. in the end, after we did all of this, we had this 8-hour charrette, and we sat, there were 40 people in the room, similar to this, but at tables, and we had discussions of what innovation was, what did IIT want as an innovation. Well, they said, okay, well, this is innovation, and it has design thinking. And when we talk about design thinking, we talk about theme-based learning. We talk about iPros, which is interdisciplinary programs. So the lawyers, the business school, the architects, the Institute of Design would come together and come up with a project, work on it together for a semester. It also started to talk about entrepreneurship. The Illinois Institute of Technology likes to think of themselves as pushing the field, as coming up with the next greatest thing. So that was the side of innovation. Okay, but then there was a whole group of people who said, well, wait a minute, it's also about creativity. And what is creative at the Illinois Institute of Technology, which is predominantly an engineering school? Well, rapid prototyping, digital library, 3D visualization, research, technology. Again, technology comes to play quite a bit. But why did we want this for our university? Well, we wanted something that would attract, I think, the best and the brightest to come to our university. And we thought allowing a big sort of think tank with all the different departments coming together, that perhaps it would start to mix and match, and we would come up with some new ideas. So it was also about attracting and making it visible to the greater world, not just the university, even though the university itself needed that visibility. Everyone was in their own particular department. Architects don't talk to engineers. Engineers don't talk to the business people. Business people don't talk to the lawyers. We're in different physical departments. We're in different, actually, locations throughout the city. The law department and the business school are downtown. The Institute of Design is downtown, but even further removed. And so it was the engineers and architects just on the main campus. So I think this was a way to break down the barriers of trying to bring people together and saying, this isn't your building. This is a building in which your students work. No one owns this building. And again, I think it was a new way of looking at what we already had and trying to figure out how to best optimize the brains that are on the campus and bringing them together in a unique way. These were the types of programs that people were asking for, and I went through a few of them. But to mix gallery with an auditorium, you would have areas of nesting that you could have small groups of people working on a project and staying there for long periods of time. So in other words, this room might become a studio, and the studio could stay here for 6 months. You wouldn't have to pick your things up every night. So that was the idea of nesting. You would have all the tools to do whatever you'd like, fabrication, assembly. You would have storage. Again, that's something that's lacking in many universities, especially in the United States where you have a commuting population. Most of our students don't live on campus. So it was a series of spaces that were going to be used in a different way, or at least that was the hope. With that in mind, we went across the country. And the first school that we visited, again, was Stanford, because it's known for the most innovative area, the D School, as it's called. It's a certificate, and it's a graduate program, so you have to apply to get into it. It's centered, the students are all are graduate students, but they come from all the engineering schools, computer science, business, medicine, law, and design. And so they bring them all together for interdisciplinary learning. The design philosophy is really to foster deep collaboration and cross-pollination. Those were the words that they used. And to develop big picture ideas. So the space is really an interesting space because it's a found space. It's almost leftover space in the university. It's in an alley. It's only 2 stories tall. It's a big garage. It's an area that, again, anything can happen. So what we found interesting about this was that you didn't need a big building to have all this happen. At the Illinois Institute of Technology, they wanted 100,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet of flexible space. And we were trying to think, what's that magic number? This is such a small space, and yet this is the type of activity that goes on. You have whiteboards, again, temporary space. You have lounge areas when you get tired. You have spaces that can be used for many different things. When I was there, they were having a review, a final review of some design idea. There are no dedicated offices. They're all swing space for all the professors. Nobody occupies it. It's really a very flexible temporal space. Tools that you can use. Again, this is the very simple layout. These are study rooms. You can come in and start to make things happen. These are not to occupy for nesting space. The nesting space is up here, called studio space. And this was a total mess. There were groups of 5, and they would be in their little camps, and they made their own physical space. So it really was one big open room. So you had a few shared spaces, but really it was open and flexible. You could be situated in this type of a seating area. Again, really very informal, very formal, but it allows for all these things to occur, and that's what they said they liked. It was about the people. It wasn't so much about the physical space that they liked, and here's the shared space. That's what it really did look like on that. The whiteboards are defining space, as well as the furniture. Totally flexible and very dynamic. Ooh. Okay. So that's the area that's on the ground floor. The second one, this is at Northwestern University, and this is in Chicago, Evanston, Illinois. That's a suburb just north of Chicago. Again, this is a much larger institution, 15,000 students. Stanford has about 8,000. And this is, again, similar idea. It's 60,000 square feet, or I've got it in square meters too. So it's 7,400, 80,000 square feet, 7,400 square meters. Cost $31 million, a fairly moderate cost. And the number of students that use this area is approximately 400 graduates and 300 graduates. So they're mixing the two groups. And what they did is they said, we have a computer science department, we have an English department. How come we can't bring those two together? Computer science was really in its own silo, and the freshman English, everybody had to take those courses. So they mixed those two in this building. You have the graduates, you have engineering design and communication, the freshmen. So the highest and the lowest within the university, bringing them together. You also have the Siegel Design Institute, and that has numerous iterations. Again, it's about design for America. It's product design. There's a small architecture department, very small, again, mainly for the engineers. But it was Ford Motor Company, it was the engineering design center. And this, again, they were trying to promote community within an area they felt did not have community. What we found here is that the undergraduates were on the ground floor and below grade. So there were 3 levels below ground level, and then there were 2 levels above the ground level. The 2 floors above, very traditional space. It was offices. It was occupied for a long term. The most innovative space was really walking in at the front door and seeing a big workshop with all the tools. People were doing rapid prototyping, all within that. And then there was this one conference room that overlooked. You can see it here. That was their idea of blending. And I think that they actually brought a little bit of community in for the in the atrium. But overall, as you can see, you can just tell by the colors, is that as you got up to level 3, it really became a typical academic building. So they weren't quite ready to call it an innovation center. They still had a lot of programmatic requirements. But level -1, ground, and level 1 really were the mixing chambers that I would call. And that was, as we saw it, the most innovative within that building. So there is openness. As you can see, this is the main entry looking down at the machine shop right here. You see that connection. And you have a few places outside looking in. So there is some openness, and so they felt that by showing it physically, there would be some collaboration. Whoop. There's a bridge across the atrium, so there is some communication. Again, when we were there, we didn't see many people using that bridge. Most of the people were down on the ground floor. And again, some of these photos were taken by the people that I was with. So you don't see many people above level 1. And in fact, when we got to level 4, people were asking us why we were there. So it really wasn't very friendly. One thing about this building is that they really use sustainability as one of their key components. So they really were experimenting with a number of ideas in terms of lighting, day lighting, underfloor electrical distribution, and again, water on-site retention and irrigation. And that was unique to this university. This was the first of the LEED buildings. That's what we call. Then we get to the most elaborate of all, and you probably are aware of this MIT Media Lab. And this was a huge project at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In fact, they wouldn't give us the cost. It was, I think, the expense was so high they didn't want to talk about it. It's double the size of Northwestern. And again, it's 300 to 400 students, but it's graduate only. And you can see this is along the river in Boston, or in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I think what they tried to do here is they were trying to bring together the silos. MIT has always been known for an engineering school, and the engineers have very set departments. And this was one man who came in as the head of the department and said, no, it's time to shake things up at MIT. So the students, it was built adjacent to the architecture department. It has the Visual Arts Center, so there's a gallery on the ground floor. The School of Architecture and Planning, the Design Lab, and the Center for Advanced Visual Studies are all occupying this space. The Program in Comparative Media Studies is there as well. And together with the other building, the original building, the complex really serves as a showplace for new concepts. So not only are they working there, but you can come in and they're almost on display, the way that this is shown. This is a very highly polished building. on the campus. What they saw is a vertical interaction more than the horizontal at Stanford or the traditional stacking. That they thought that having everybody come in through this ground floor plane, and it really is open from this point to this point. It's a full lobby. Now again, they're doors. We can't have something completely open in Massachusetts due to the weather. But this is the central atrium space that connects all the major rooms, and these are two-story spaces, to one another with some sort of visual connection as well. The top is completely used for executive conference, so it's a big money-making part of their building. This is the atrium that I was talking about. This was designed it was all white, designed with just the color for the circulation. So it's very striking. It almost looks like a sculpture. And those are the stairs that take you up to the lab areas. This is the lobby that is used for exhibits, gallery, and it also takes you into the workshops. This is just one of the lounge areas within the space, not located within the atrium, but off to the side overlooking the landscape. This is the conference area overlooking the skyline of Boston. The section is, again, quite complex, but once you get into it, the colors help to guide you. So these spaces here would be ringed with offices for the professors, and they would not be allowed to occupy longer than 10 years. So typically in the United States, if you're a tenured faculty, you're given an office, and that's your space. You can do whatever you want. Well, they said, just remember, you're going to be leaving in 10 years. So it was a very different mindset for these professors to all of a sudden come into a new building and realize that the furniture was not theirs. It was given to them. The bookcases were set, and they had to fill it, but know that they were leaving in 10 years. What they ended up doing was putting 3 disciplines together always, very different disciplines. So it was almost like a sandbox, that you'd have 3 different people coming in, 3 different groups, trying to come up with ideas that they could work together. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But that was the idea for this building. So within each of these pockets, and I think there are 4 of these lab spaces, that you have a double height for anything from robots, making robots. There was a sound lab going on at the time I was there. They were doing all types of experiments, but in a very different way. It was just a mess, which I enjoyed. You can see somewhat the stacking of this building, the grand stair, the main entry. This was just yet another little nesting place where you could come in, you could work as a group, right in the middle of the main lobby. The elevators were centrally located right with the stairs. I didn't see many people using the elevators. Everybody was using these stairwells. And as you can see, these are the 2 major ones connecting the first levels. But this one could take you bypassing up to the level 4. Again, very interconnected. And you'll see this is the robot area. This was interesting because there was a telephone booth in the middle of it. I have no idea what they were doing there. But there was openness, and yet there were places that were enclosed. Here are the offices, and that was typical throughout these spaces. You have the lecture room that's on the top floor with the executive conference. So if there were a conference or a symposium, you would go all the way up to the top. The gallery was open for everyone.
You didn't have to show an ID to walk through. So again, it allowed for people to mix freely at the ground level. Circulation. The vertical circulation was very important. I think when you have 6 floors, it's a little bit more difficult to have the interaction as if with the design school at Stanford. 2 floors makes a lot of sense. 6 floors makes it a little more cumbersome, but it was a repetitive plan in certain ways with those atriums. This is just showing the proportions of the open spaces to the closed spaces. Now, in comparison, this is why we did it, is we wanted to show the 3 very different spaces. So one West Coast, again, I use West, Midwest, and East, just so that you can see the differences in our country in many different ways. 14 million, just in terms of cost, 14 million for the D School. It was a renovation. They reused an existing, so that was very sustainable. Ford Design Center, brand new building, statement. They wanted to attract students. The MIT, brand new building, incredible amount of money, but this was the first big building saying, I think this was one of the first on any of the university campuses that started to mix the engineers with the artists. Then we looked at square footage. The most dense was the design school. It only had 50 square feet per person. And you get up to the other 2, and it was 4 times as big per person. Flexible space, much more flexible. The white indicates the more flexibility. So you have this being the most flexible. MIT has quite a bit of flexibility, very little flexible space for Northwestern. The dedicated circulation, that Stanford believed that circulation really brought people together. The least amount of dedicated circulation was MIT, that grand atrium. Transparency, very transparent for MIT. These were not so for the outside looking in. Sustainability, certainly Northwestern was very involved with that. There wasn't much sustainability for MIT. And that, again, I think that when it was built, it wasn't as much a priority, but they also had an idea of making a much bigger statement to the world that they were changing. And that's how they were showing it through the physical environment. And that's the final slide for these 3. Again, I think the reason that I showed innovation schools as well as the art schools is that I'm trying to show how things are changing in our country of really trying to bring the disparate arts together with the sciences to make something more unique and more creative. All right, good.